Yeah, okay. So during the week, I went down to Hobart, the capital of Tasmania, because my wife needed to go to hospital fairly urgently. She's on the mend now, so there's no need to worry there, but she was in quite a bit of discomfort. I wasn't allowed into the hospital one morning to visit her, so I thought I'd pop down and have a look at the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. And there you can see it. It's a lovely museum. It's well laid out. And you can see their byline there, stories that move you. And I can say, there was lots of good displays there, but there certainly were some stories on the evolutionary sense that moved me to tears. Here's some of the unique fauna that we have in Tasmania. Obviously the stuffed variety, but we've got some quolls on the left-hand side, the tiger quoll on the top left, the eastern quoll, which is now extinct on the mainland, but still found in Tasmania. These are both regarded as endangered species here. We've got the Tasmanian devil on the bottom right, also now an endangered species, as we spoke of a few shows ago, because of the devil facial tumour disease. And of course, the egg-laying mammals, the monotremes, platypus and the echidna on the top right. They're not regarded as endangered species. But there is another endangered species. In fact, we've got quite a few endangered species here in Tasmania. Maybe that's being part of an island on the southern end of a remote continent. And here's one here, the giant freshwater crayfish. This is actually the largest freshwater invertebrate in the world. It can get up to nearly 50 centimetres, or for you imperial people, nearly 2 foot. And they can get up to about 3 kilograms in weight. So they're quite a hefty crayfish. We've actually had some on display at Seahorse World in the past, and they're a beautiful animal. But they are endangered. They live in the freshwater rivers, the larger rivers in the northern part of the state, including around where I live. But there was another display that caught my attention that also displayed the giant freshwater crayfish, and that was this one. It was called Extinction Studies. So there's a drawing of the giant freshwater crayfish. There's also the start of a drawing of the orange-bellied parrot, of which there's less than 50 individuals, I think, at the moment, still in existence. And the idea of this particular exhibit was that the artist would draw an endangered species with the knowledge that in time the paper and the drawing would fade, the paper would disintegrate in time, sort of reflecting extinction. So here's the sign there and what it says. The process of drawing and erasure, or evolution and extinction, is repeated in full knowledge that the paper will deteriorate and the eraser's shavings will accumulate. Now, I can handle the analogy that, maybe the animals approaching extinction and that sort of can relate to the drawing and the degradation of the paper. But I cannot handle the fact that evolution reflects either of these two creations. The drawing, of course, is regarded by everyone as a creation, yet in the museum's mind at least, the real giant freshwater crayfish is regarded as evolution, as something that's evolved. Clearly, the creation of the drawing is nowhere near the complexity of the three-dimensional, self-moving, self-reproducing creation of God in the giant freshwater crayfish. So that's just one of those things that the museums are teaching. Again, it's still school holidays here, and there's lots of kids learning this sort of stuff. Another display, and given that we're talking a lot about archaeology today, I thought we'd just quickly look at some of the Aboriginal displays that they had here. And the idea that Aboriginals are one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, if not the oldest, and been around 35, 40 plus thousand years, it's not obviously agreed with by us, but they're believed to have been in Tasmania for about 35,000 years, and they call it there an unimaginably long time. The Aboriginals walked to Tasmania along the land bridge that's now Bass Strait between the mainland and the island. And we hold to that as well, but that it wasn't that long ago. It was probably during the Ice Age of Job's time, a few hundred years after the flood, about 4,000 years ago. But consider that the Aboriginals, when they came to Australia, most likely came in boats from India. And they needed the technology of that. And it doesn't surprise us because they are descendants of Adam, of course, but Noah, who built the ark. But here's a model from the 1840s that shows the canoes that were built by the Aboriginals of the time in Tasmania. We're not sure if this one was built by an Aboriginal or a colonial, but it is indeed an accurate replica of the type of crafts they built. This is the extent of Aboriginal maritime technology after 35,000 years in Tasmania, where at the time of their discovery by Europeans, this is the technology of ships that the Europeans were building. Now, I'm not at any point suggesting that Europeans are more intelligent than Aboriginals. Of course they're not. There's Aboriginals in this day and age that are more than capable of getting PhDs in maritime shipbuilding expertise. But what it does show is that there's been a degradation of the technological know-how of Aboriginals since they first came to Tasmania and indeed Australia. You don't see really any evidence of any complex ships being built by Aboriginals in Australia. I think that the secular viewpoint that they've been here 35,000 years and yet can only make a rudimentary canoe is not very complementary to the Aboriginals in any way, shape or form, whereas the biblical viewpoint is reflecting the fact that they've been probably few individuals in a much shorter period before that didn't have the knowledge of shipbuilding as they moved around Australia and got to Tasmania, and it's just been lost. Here's a full-size one. So since the early 1800s, the Aboriginals had actually lost the capacity to make canoes at all, but a group of Aboriginal people, the local Indigenous people, have decided to revive the art of canoe building and did this in 2007. That's a full-size one there at the bottom of the screen. And they even were able to use it on calm water around the edges of Tasmanian coastline. So what can we conclude from this? That time has been no help to Aboriginal technological advancement. Rather, it was actually leading to the extinction of their knowledge. And that's for some of the reasons we have just discussed. Time doesn't evolve anything, including knowledge or intelligence. It only destroys. And the reason that the Europeans were able to advance their technological know-how, they were direct descendants of Javan, which the Bible in Genesis chapter 10 says were the maritime peoples, the shipbuilders. Probably also the Phoenicians came from that line. Certainly the Greeks did, and they were all great ocean-going peoples. So they were able to educate each other, to interact, and keep the technology going and improving, whereas others, such as the Aboriginals, came to a big land mass and spent most of their time on land and just lost that knowledge. Modern advancement, therefore, only comes from ongoing, organised and careful education of the next generation. We're only one generation away from losing knowledge on so many things. So design and technology only comes from creative minds.